G'day and welcome to KrakenCast. This is the oceanic branch of the Vassals of Kingsgrave's Game of Thrones review series. Today we will be discussing episode 6 of season 5, entitled Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken. My name is Duncan, or Valkyrist on the forums, and joining me today from New Zealand we have Joseph.
G'day, I go by Chuck Gamer on the forums.
From Indonesia we have Silvana.
Yes, this is Silvana, Silphobia in the forums.
And finally, we have a special guest host calling all the way from Wolfcast territory, Glenn.
Hi there, my name is Glenn. I'm Dagus Rivers from the forums.
So, guys, remember when Ned Stark got his head chopped off? Those seem like such happier times.
Yeah.
This is, it's potentially one of the most controversial episodes of Game of Thrones ever. Various sections of the fandom currently resemble post-war Riverlands. Scores of book readers and show watchers are rage quitting the show. But we will be just trying to give our thoughts on it in this podcast. Hopefully we can rein it in and avoid getting sucked down any black holes. We'll just sort of leave that part of the storyline until the end. But, there's still some interesting stuff in the episode that we can go over. So with that, let's kick it off with lemon cake ratings. Joseph, would you like to go first?
Yep, sure. On the whole, episode was it was all right. It was pretty good. There wasn't anything. I say wasn't anything, excluding certain major things that were incredibly bad or troubling. But there wasn't anything that really stood out as amazing either.
Excluding this gigantic elephant in the room, everything else is fine.
Yeah. Adjusting, I would give it somewhere around 2.5 lemon cakes. But it was consistent for the most part. So yeah, 2.5.
Silvana, what did you think?
I think my rating is the same with Joseph, 2.5 lemon cakes. Some scenes I really like because they are well written. Some are just so-so, and the rest is either weird or appalling. I certainly don't think that the title is translated well into some of the scenes, especially into the Dorne scenes. And, of course, the last scene. It should be like Bowed, Bent, Broken.
Yeah, that was...
Unbowed, Unbent, Unbroken.
That was my hashtag immediately after watching the episode.
Yeah, gosh. But anyhow, we'll always have the books. So that's fine.
She said, desperately clutching her books.
Yeah. I'm reading the Elaine chapter again.
Yeah, Elaine chapter is so nice compared to this. So you seem to have calmed down a bit. I think you were furious on the forums, or was that someone else?
No, it wasn't me.
Oh, okay. Okay, no worries.
To be fair, I think that was many people were furious on the forums.
Yeah, I think that was sort of... My initial reaction wasn't fury, it was just kind of nausea, like, I don't even want to watch this show anymore, it wasn't like a rage quit, it was just like, this is no longer enjoyable to me, but I've sort of...
Fundamentally unpleasant.
Yeah, I've sort of... I don't know. I've sort of stepped back from that a little bit, but Glenn, what did you think of the episode?
Well, it seems like I may have an unpopular opinion about the episode, but I really enjoyed it. And of the episodes so far for this season, I would say it's the second best episode. I just felt it was really great story, great involvement with the characters, and some really great quotes this episode as well. And I would say I think 3.75 lemon cakes.
Okay. I was pretty mixed, or I should say extremely mixed. I found the first half of the episode really entertaining. I love the developing relationship between Tyrion and Jorah. I'm finding the Faceless Men stuff really compelling and surreal. Like, I like the really weird sort of Lynchian feel to a lot of it. And like the last episode, I like how it spends significant time with each character rather than sort of erratically cutting back and forth. It feels much more like chapters, that kind of novelistic sort of storytelling. But then we jump to Dorne, which I just found laughably silly. And not just the implausibility of the storyline, but just the action sequence itself just felt really subpar compared to the fight against the Dornish soldiers a couple of episodes ago. And the campiness obviously is really jarring when it precedes the sort of absolute horror show that was Winterfell this week. And I think the final sequence I actually found chillingly effective in terms of filmmaking. But the implications for Sansa's character from a narrative perspective are really disheartening. I'm not going to say absolutely that they shouldn't have shown that because, they're obviously telling their own story, but at the same time they have to be responsible for those decisions. And I think everything will sort of depend on the final few episodes of the season in terms of how that scene will be contextualized. But based on past incidents, my expectations aren't high. But with that in mind, I'll probably give it 2.75 overall. So yeah. I guess we'll just jump into the episode itself, starting with Braavos, I think. After weeks of preparing bodies in the House of Black and White, Arya demands the right to start being trained as a faceless man. Jaqen tests her ability to lie by asking her about her life. She tells him, receiving a whip every time she alters a detail. Jaqen tells her that she is not ready because she cannot shed the truth of who she is. Later, a father brings his dying daughter to the temple and begs for the gift of mercy. Arya delivers it. Jaqen then leads her into the forbidden lower levels of the temple and shows her the thousands and thousands of faces that the faceless men possess. While she is still not ready to become no one, he concedes that she is ready to become someone else.
I do have a question. You know the girl that received mercy, did she have grayscale?
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
I couldn't tell because it was so dark. I couldn't tell if maybe there was some problem with her face, but I was just thinking because that's part of the storyline this season that maybe grayscale is something that she had.
Yeah, I don't think I didn't notice it on her face. I thought it was maybe some other affliction, like degenerative bone or whatever, or some kind of cancer or something. But that would have been a really interesting tie-in, yeah, bringing back the effects of grayscale. But yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, I like the atmosphere, the feel of the place. I think it's one of the best sets that they ever done in the show. Even though I kind of, I got reminded of the Department of Mysteries in Harry Potter movies. You guys remember that? Yeah, especially when they entered the vault of the faces. So it's like, oh my God, it feels like, yeah.
Yeah.
But I really like everything Arya is doing in Braavos. It's just marvelous filmmaking. I cannot wait for her to go to the next level, going blind. Becoming, like an assassin's apprentice or something, selling seafood around Braavos and all those stuff she's doing in that place. So yeah, I think I will not have any complaints with any of Arya's scenes in Braavos, maybe, but I don't know. And then we also will get Meryn Trant, right, coming with Mace Tyrell, and
yeah.
she'll probably do her first kill as a member of the House of Black and White. So yeah, I cannot wait for the next things Arya's going to do.
It has this sort of eerie grey mist just read throughout the place. This feeling of death just kind of soaking through the building, and figures just emerge from the darkness and disappear really quickly. It feels like this really strange limbo place. It has this fantastic dreamlike music. Yeah, I really like the eerie sort of surreal qualities to it, definitely.
Yeah, as I think I've said on the podcast before, I'm not the biggest Arya fan, but I was totally digging all these scenes in Braavos at the moment. I do really quite like this part of her story. And I think the highlight for me was the lying game, and they introduced it quite naturally, and it wasn't as clunky as I thought it would be, and it just popped up naturally out of the actions of the other girl. Yeah, whose story was not remotely believable. Did anyone else for a second think she was telling the truth?
No, not really. Oh, I guess it could have gone either way, but it didn't seem that heartfelt or anything.
I'm also wondering why there are so many people hanging around in Braavos that speak Westerosi, but that's probably just hand-waved by the show to save them having to hire their linguist to write lots of Valyrian for them.
Well, I think of all the free cities, Braavos seems to be the biggest in traffic from east to west. And it's it's hard to, where the dividing lines are the free cities Western Europe? Are they the Middle East? They don't seem as foreign as you think they would be. Illyrio Mopatis basically seems like a Westerosi.
Well, yeah, Braavos is like a stone's throw away from the Eyrie. It's pretty much at the same height as that, just, across the narrow sea. So, yeah, there probably is a lot of traffic between the two.
Yeah, it doesn't have the exotic sort of qualities of Slaver's Bay and all that. And this temple does seem like a destination for those kinds of requests. Like, people would travel far and wide to come to the House of Black and White because of its reputation. I thought there was an interesting contrast between, the way both the Stark sisters, their scenes are just really dark, visually, just they're wreathed in darkness and lit by candles. And there's also an interesting echo of water, Arya's kind of like washing the bodies of the dead, and you get a scene at the end of the episode with like Miranda washing Sansa's hair, and I thought it was sort of suggests like baptism and rebirth and reincarnation and that kind of transformation, because both the Stark sisters are kind of like transforming into something different. Going back to the lying scene, it worked well. It was kind of like a good recap of Arya's journey up until that point, and it was quite vicious, like when he's snapping at her with the whip. I thought, oh, that's really harsh. Like, she's obviously a child, but I really like the Jack and Hagar actor. I really love that they brought him back. I think it creates a nice bridge between this season and season 2, which obviously had more that kind of mystical elements to it, like this one. And he's just a great actor. I think he just has such great presence. Just the way he like whispers, like breathing, just like draws you in, and it's really engaging.
Yeah, I think he has a very good chemistry with Maisie Williams as well. So that's make all the scenes work.
I liked the Lion Game too. It did remind me of Kill Bill Volume 2, so the scenes involving Padme and Uma Thurman, and that was sort of a similar vibe to it, where Padme would always, slap or hit Uma Thurman at the slightest thing.
Yeah, it's sort of this correcting. I mean, it is quite Reek-like in terms of rewriting the human psyche or whatever, bit by bit, through abuse. But it also brings back to this idea that in the House of Black and White, truth and lies just become this fluid concept, because what you're actually doing is you're not actually trying to tell a lie. You're trying to detach yourself from who you are. You're trying to figure out who you are as a character, and then step out of that role almost, and then try and step into a different role. So it is this really weird sort of abdication of the self, and I think that ties in really interesting to Arya, because she's had such a traumatic life, and she wants to, part of her fascination, or part of what's drawing her to the Faceless Man, is this desire to leave that behind her, because it makes her feel weak or vulnerable or alone. And if she can shed that, the Arya Stark, and she can maybe become something different, something powerful, something happy.
As an aside, if you didn't say or when turns out Arya does on some level like the Hound, you're likely dead inside.
Oh yeah, that was so nice. She loves him. No, she probably doesn't love him, but she doesn't hate him.
Yeah, they're pretty much the same. Like they're the same archetype of character, just at different points in their development, or at least they were before Arya's archetype jumped straight into the I want to become a crazed murder person with no personality whatsoever.
I think that's something they did really well on the show, getting the sense of kinship of the broken person between those two characters, because they both lost so much, they've both been betrayed by so many people who they trusted. And it felt like in the middle of the season there was a camaraderie between them, and it wasn't until the very end, when the Hound is lying, dying, taunting her to kill him, that she does this reversal and decides, no, I hate you. But that was an interesting moment where he says, a girl lies to me, a girl lies to the House of Black and White, a girl lies to herself. So truth and lies is another interesting theme in this episode. A lot of characters are asked to be honest, like Tyrion and Jorah being questioned by the slavers, and Sansa being questioned by Ramsay, and obviously the pre-trial in King's Landing. And lies seem to be the safe haven. It's telling the truth that seems to get you in trouble. So the ability to lie is like this shield that a lot of characters have to use to survive.
You guys noticed that there are no wolf dreams in the series.
No, there's not. It seems like Bran is the only character who they've acknowledged as being a warg. The stuff with Sansa and Jon seems to have been scrapped, which is a shame. Sort of big implications for Jon, like, that a big part of the theory that he'll come back is that he'll be preserved in Ghost's body. But yeah, I love the wolf dreams that Arya has are probably my favorite of all the wolf dreams, because it's such a contrast between her being the victim and her desiring to be the predator. Her desire, her obsession with death, her obsession with revenge, the violence that she is exposed to and victimized by sort of turned outwards. Like, she goes through such a tragic change as a child, very much. I think Martin's referred to it as the path of the child soldier, being twisted by the violence that surrounds them. And the wolf dreams are the most powerful sort of symbol of that, as she's sinking her teeth into living flesh and devouring people and conquering the Riverlands, while in real life she's just this sort of scared little girl huddled in a stone bed.
I also liked personally the way that she uses the cat when she's blinded, and that sort of like that was in the books. That was a nice little twist on it, and how she ended up sort of overcoming her teacher. And yeah, it appears we're going to lose that because it might just seem a little sort of out of nowhere to have her start controlling or at least viewing through the eyes of animals now, which is a shame.
So we don't actually get that many chapters with Braavos. I think it's about 5 between the 2 novels, and they've covered about half of it. So where do you guys think Arya's going to be heading next? It seems like she's passed the first test and she's going to be able to put on a new face, and Meryn Trant might be at the end of that mission. I don't know whether they order her to do it or she just does it, going AWOL and killing someone who she wants to kill as Arya Stark. But what are your guys' thoughts on the future of the storyline?
Yeah, I see her. She's going to kill either Trant and or Mace Tyrell, and then the series is probably going to end with you're going back to Westeros, like mission briefing in the final episode. It's just like a little 5-minute aside from whatever like action scene they want to focus on somewhere else in the world.
Yeah, and I guess we won't know until we get the Winds of Winter whether it's a spoiler or whether it's just show fan fiction, but at the end of this season or, some point in the next season, she's going to be either sent off on a mission that will form the sort of third act of her story, or she'll, abandon the Faceless Man and then head off on her next part of the story. So, yeah, she's one of those characters that we're verging into the unpublished material, which is scary and exciting at the same time.
Maybe she'll be sent to kill Balon Greyjoy.
Oh, yeah.
That would be cool.
That would be interesting. And that could kick off the Kingsmoot next season, maybe?
Yeah, for season 6. Season 6.
Possible.
I like this idea.
Well, that would have to involve Euron coming to the House of Black and White. So we might actually... I mean, this is obviously your theory that Euron does it, but it seems pretty plausible. And then her going to the Iron Islands. That would be interesting.
I'm wondering how they're going to handle having her become a faceless man and having her changing her faces, which by necessity probably means changing actors or actresses. And sort of because Maisie Williams is a good Arya, and I'm wondering sort of once she becomes not Arya and becomes no one, are they going to just start picking random actors?
Well, there was this shot in the trailer of this, it seemed like it was a prostitute dancing in front of someone, and originally I thought that was like one of the Sand Snakes sort of dancing, trying to seduce Jaime, but we haven't seen that character yet, so what I'm afraid of is that Meryn Trant is going to go to a brothel, and she's going to pretend to be a prostitute and kill him, which could be like, going back to the controversy that we're faced with in this episode, could be a whole new can of worms.
One thing that I had to say, and I didn't even realise until we started this conversation, that do you think that maybe Braavos is sort of like Switzerland in the real world? Just thinking about the girl, the father that brings his daughter to Braavos to give the girl mercy, and I was just thinking it's sort of similar to this place in Switzerland where you can go if you want to receive assisted suicide.
You mean like sort of contemporary, like sort of modern day Switzerland?
Yeah.
That's right. So the concern is if the father just kills the daughter himself, then there's the guilt of kinslaying, and then there's the repercussions of that as well.
Could well be. I mean,
there might be a medieval comparison as well.
I wonder if there's any sort of what would happen if you if you attempted suicide, but then someone saved you. If there was maybe would you be hanged anyway, or if you would be punished in some way?
I don't think you'd be hanged for attempted suicide. Oh, sorry, assisted suicide. Maybe, yeah, possibly. And maybe, I guess the Faceless Men have like a special status that... I mean, Braavos is its own thing. It's like, it doesn't answer to anyone, really. It's a sovereign state ruled by the Sea Lord, who seems pretty down with the Faceless Man and the Iron Bank. There seems to be like a brotherhood with, they're not squabbling amongst themselves like the other Free Cities or the Seven Kingdoms. It seems much more unified.
Or on another note, it might just be a really bad idea to mess with either the business with unlimited money or the business of professional assassins.
Yes,
they might just sort of be left alone for
they've got both. We should just mention, the final scene of the storyline where they go down into this cavernous room with all the faces. This was like a huge, like shivers down your spine moment. Partly because, like, I don't know, a lot of the architecture in the House of Black and White temple is these quite small rooms, narrow corridors, narrow chambers, whereas here it's almost this impossible space beneath this temple. It almost seems to take up more space than the temple, is wide. Like it's traveling beneath Braavos itself. These huge columns covered in faces. It's very darkly fantastical, very arresting to the eye.
Very haunting.
I imagine they've stacked up a lot of faces over the years. They would need a fantastically unending room to stick them all, unless they do the museum thing and just have like a boring back room with just most of their faces just in little boxes stacked up neatly.
Yeah, the poor construction worker has to keep digging out more space so they can the crazy faceless men can add more faces to their face archive.
and it's if you're that guy, you're not going to say no. Yes, boss. Okay, boss. I'll get the pickaxe.
This guy in highlighter yellow vest just hacking away. It's a living. And special mention to the music, I thought was just, as you say, Glenn, just haunting. I love that. Great presence. Did anyone else think that the face was going to blink when Arya reached out to touch it? I was on the edge of my seat, really scared that the face was going to do something.
Yeah.
But that should be definitely interesting going forward. So it'll be fun to talk more about Braavos. But let's move on to the Valyrian coast. So, during arrest, Tyrion reveals to Jorah the truth of why he had to flee Westeros. He also informs him of Lord Commander Mormont's death at the hands of his own men, to Jorah's heartache. Later, they are accosted and captured by a gang of slavers. They are bound for Volantis, but Tyrion convinces them that Jorah is a great warrior, and that he will make them a lot of money in the fighting pits of Meereen. So, I'm really enjoying the Tyrion and Jorah developing friendship. What about you guys?
Yeah. I think they're still making Tyrion likable, right? Compared with his book version.
That's true, definitely.
But I really like this duo, and that look of despair in Jorah's face after Tyrion told him about his father is just, my heart is a little bit, I got a little bit heartbreak. So it's.
I was just astounded that he didn't know about his father dying, but then I realised, of course, he didn't, because he's on the other side of the world. And it always amazes me when things like that happen in the books as well, when the characters learn of something that we learned 2 books ago or something.
And he doesn't know in the books either, does he?
He's still not learned that.
Yeah.
It's never touched on, I don't think, no.
But I'm glad they put it in here because, I agree. It was heartbreaking to see his expression. I kind of wish Tyrion had told him the rest of the story, that because he says, he was killed by mutineers of the Brotherhood. He was killed by his own men, which is just a horrible thing to hear. But after that, you hear about, the men of Castle Black rising up and crushing the mutineers to the man. That might have been a nice thing to add, but maybe Tyrion didn't get that installment of the story.
Yeah, sort of the way it panned out was interesting. He was a good man, and he cared about everyone under his command. Shame he got mutinied, though.
This is Game of Thrones, Jorah. If he's nice, he gets stabbed to death.
And the sentence, Tyrion's sentence, he's asking Jorah, why a woman who has not spent her adult life in Westeros can rule Westeros? That's
a good question. It's a good question, Jorah. Yeah, his answer was conveniently averted by slavers. Very convenient. But they converse a bit on their daddy issues. Jorah loved his father, but he betrayed him, or he let him down. They both feel like, and obviously Tyrion's father hated him. He hated his father, but they both have this. They wanted to live up to their father's expectations, and they both of them failed. And so I like this pairing. There's interesting echoes of one another as sons. Like a lot of the best couplings in the show, it's really engaging to just see them walking and talking and bantering with each other and learning more about each other as landscapes kind of just flow by, like Brienne and Jaime or Arya and the Hound. It's very much in that vein, which I think Game of Thrones has done really well.
It seems to be one of their strengths, is how they can just get 2 good actors playing 2 good characters and just put them in a scene and have them banter. A lot of the Queen of Thorns and Tywin stuff comes to mind as well. As there's just sort of that level of putting two actors that you want to see communicate with each other and just sort of letting them go at it. Doesn't really move the plot along, but it is always enjoyable to watch.
Well, yeah, I know. Well, we always think about Game of Thrones in terms of plot, but ultimately it's the characters that makes the story so engaging. Plot's important, obviously, because it's constantly changing and threatening and having the characters have to face various challenges, but ultimately the characters are the most interesting things. And it's something that never really occurred to me in the books, like Jorah and Tyrion. It was never that engaging in the books as it could have been, but here they've fleshed out something quite interesting. I guess in the books they also have Penny, and they're not actually on their own for that long because they ship off from Volantis and then they're immediately captured by a slave ship, so they're always surrounded by enemies. But we got at least a couple of scenes with those two together. But it's an interesting point, Sylvana, that they're definitely whitewashing Tyrion a lot. He's nowhere near as vicious and bitter and horrible as he was in the books. I do think he's sort of past the threshold last episode because he sort of hasn't been had access to alcohol. He's had his sort of detox cruise. He's sort of been in awe of the dragons. He's survived death at the hands of the Stone Men. He's found something of a kinship with Jorah. So I think I think it's past as bad as it was. It probably wasn't as bad as a lot of people expected, but I think it's past that now.
What do you guys think of Malco, the slave trader? Is that his name, Malco?
Well, it's weird to say I like him, but I like the actor. I think I've seen him in a couple of shows. I think he was on Lost. He played Mr. Echo, and he was also a crazy Nigerian drug lord in a prison show called Oz, and he was really fantastic in both of them. He has a great presence, I think, just like very imposing, muscular. His voice is very powerful. So I love him. I think he's a good choice as a slaver.
Well, sure, the slavers did look menacing, but I wasn't really paying attention to them. I guess I was just more paying attention to Jorah and Tyrion more, and that the slavers were just in the background.
He probably has the best line of the episode.
The series so far.
What was? I'm trying to remember what it was. We'll keep the dwarf alive until we find a cock merchant.
Oh, right.
Which is another hell of a job, I imagine.
I can't. It's a pretty.
I don't think it was generous that they were going to cut his throat first, then cut off his cock. Whereas I thought it would be the other way around.
Yeah, it was nice of them. But Tyrion's terror when that happens, I think Dinklage definitely sold that. And there's sort of an irony of Jorah, Tyrion's captor, being captured. It's like this dog-eat-dog world, the big fish eat the little fish kind of thing. And also probably the irony of Jorah himself being enslaved, because that's why he was forced into exile, because he tried to enslave people, and now he's sort of... And it sort of links nicely back with, talking about his father, because that was the shame that separated those two, and Jorah is having to atone for that dishonor with his house. And now Jorah is forced to confront his sins in a way and become a slave and endure what his victims felt.
Tyrion and Jorah have just terrible passive perception. They walked right past the slavers.
I know.
They weren't even there.
It's a bit ridiculous, yeah.
It was jarring. Just camera pan. Oh, there's like 5 of them just standing there.
Well, they're lucky it was in the same episode as the Dornish storyline, because that any jarringness was easily overshadowed by that.
Exactly.
Going back to sort of the Arya storyline, the idea of shedding your identity, it's interesting that Jorah and Tyrion can't really rely on their aristocracy anymore. Their relationships with Dany and the Lannisters, respectively, they're kind of having to find new ways to prove their value. Tyrion has to use his brains to get out of the situation. Jorah has to use his brawn. He has to show he's a great warrior. He can't rely on Dany or whatever to protect him. So yeah, it's about these two sort of broken, exiled characters having to survive in the world and find themselves or whatever. So I like that. It's going forward.
You could argue
that's an interesting point. That up until now, Tyrion has always relied on being Tywin Lannister's son, and now he's out in the world and fending for himself.
I guess next stop, Pits of Meereen. They're going to be taken to. That's how they're going to end up in Meereen, pushed into the fighting pits, and then Dany will see them.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on her reaction? Oh, sorry, Glenn.
Do you think Tyrion and Jorah have to fight each other in the fighting pits?
I don't think so because we got one of the promo shots picture from earlier this season showing Tyrion sat next to Dany.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Maybe it'll be like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome where Tyrion gets on his shoulders and it's like Master Blaster.
Yes. This needs to happen. Brains in the brawn.
It's so Thunderdome, the fighting pits of Meereen. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
What a lovely day.
So what do you think Dany's reaction will be to seeing Jorah? Because the last time they were with each other, she promised to kill him if he ever returns to Meereen. I guess it's kind of involuntary, though, if he's a slave.
First time she'll ever see him will be in the fighting pit.
Although, interestingly, the pre-production footage that we've seen shows... Well, one of the shots shows Jorah fighting in the pits, but another shows Tyrion sitting next to Dany. So maybe Tyrion manages to wriggle out of it somehow, but Jorah doesn't. I'm not sure.
I think I may be misremembering, but I think there's also a bunch of the Sons of the Harpy shown in what looks like an amphitheater. So maybe they stage an attack and Jorah fights them off, and then they reconnect with Dany, and Tyrion gets out scot-free just by being in proximity to Jorah.
I mean, obviously we should save that for the Marinese discussion in future episodes, but the idea of the Sons of the Harpy attacking after she's married Hizdahr doesn't make a lot of sense, but I guess we'll see. Anyway, any more to say on the Valyrian coast?
Scenery was pretty. No. I'll just put that out there. It's nice to watch.
It was pretty, yeah. There's a lot of water-based imagery in this episode. Arya washing the dead bodies, Jorah and Tyrion sitting by the glistening lakeside. And the first comment that the slavers make is, Jorah's like, they may have stopped for, and then the slaver says, water. So, I don't know, that's interesting. In terms of water being this symbol of rebirth or whatever, that's a nice little touch, possibly.
I find it interesting that Jorah was just immediately able to recognize it as a slave ship. Like, is Jorah just so, wise in the world that he knows that? Or do slavers have a massive, branding problem that they stick out like sore thumbs and they should really try to, just sort of, be a little more inconspicuous if their ship immediately sends people running for the hills?
Probably, yeah. They need to rebrand their image.
Hire an image consultant to make them more manageable.
Slavers have such a bad reputation. It's so unfair. Okay, shall we move on to Dorne?
Do we have to?
Yes, we do. We have to. We have to acknowledge Dorne.
We must be strong.
Unbowed, unbent, unbroken. Okay, so Princess Myrcella and Prince Tristan walk the water gardens arm in arm under the watchful eye of Doran Martell. Jaime and Bronn enter the city in disguise while the Sand Snakes sneak in through an underground tunnel. The two groups converge on Myrcella at the same time and a fight erupts. Captain Arya Hotar and his guards surround them and arrest all combatants. Okay, Joseph, unleash.
Well, as I once again fully disclosed that I despise Keisha Castle views for entirely irrational subjective reasons, so that slanted my perceptions immediately.
Noted.
It's really goofy. All of them showed up all at once.
Oh, so stupid.
Choreography was just abysmal, and the characterization of the Sand Snakes was not far behind. Just so underwhelming how we get the line, it's been a while since I've used that axe, do you still remember? And then he just magically appears with a whole bunch of guards and surrounds them, and just close scene, moving on.
It's like we were missing a scene or something. There's Jaime and Bronn, they arrive at the city, they suddenly get inside the water gardens, and their plan was to kidnap Myrcella in the water gardens in broad daylight in Martell territory surrounded by guards. Where were they going to take them? Back out the gates? Myrcella is under constant watch. And even dumber, what was the Sand Snake's plan? Pretty much the same thing, to try and get Myrcella in broad daylight and drag her out kicking and screaming in a Martell fortress surrounded by Martell guards that can arrive on the scene in 30 seconds flat. And dumbest of all, them miraculously arriving and converging each other at the exact same instant. How is that possible? It's like a different show entirely. It's like some campy kids TV show, like Team Rocket or something.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people say it feels like they just imported this scene from a show of much less quality, which is, that's a viewpoint I can agree with. It just feels so out of place and jarring.
Did you guys see on the forum thread the Teenage Mutant Ninja Snakes theme song? Just had like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles theme with like the sand snakes dancing around to the song.
Yeah, like tons of impractical weapons and sort of one-dimensional singular characters. That's a good parallel. I like that.
It just seems such a far cry from Oberyn, who was so compelling and nuanced and such an interesting, likable character. He had such presence and charisma. He was intimidating without having to proclaim what a badass he was. He just was a badass with his gait, and he could rip out violence only when he needed to, only when he chose to. Whereas these guys, the Sand Snakes, are constantly proclaiming about what badasses they are. But when they arrive on the scene, they can't take down two guys. One guy only has one hand, and three of them can't take him down, and they're the greatest fighters in Dorne.
The fight was really impractical. Like, on a logical level, Bronn should have been able to easily kill the two people fighting him because they had daggers and a whip, whereas he had a sword, and Bronn's a badass, so Bronn dropped the ball. But conversely, Oberyn should have just wiped the floor with Jaime, because Jaime's shown to not be at his best, and she looked to be struggling with the crippled former swordsman. So
I mean, just as fighters, there's no potency there. They're just sort of cartwheeling around like Arya did with Needle. It's just sort of gymnastics. They just look like little kids kind of poking at Jaime and Bronn. You compare that to Brienne or Sandor, who just have such physical weight behind their blows,
The casting choice seems weird. Disdain for certain people aside, do you think they would have hired actresses solely for their proficiency at fight choreography? Because we get probably 5 minutes of dialogue. We're going to get 5 minutes of dialogue at best from each of the Sand Snakes this season.
Yeah,
and the fight they were in is going to be way more memorable than anything they say. So, sort of the idea of not just casting a whole bunch of black belts or professional stunt women to do it seems like a poor choice.
And the unfortunate thing is, Dorne is such the empowerment of women is such a big part of the Dornish identity. Yet, so far, the most capable, competent characters from Dorne we've seen are men. And the women just kind of look spiteful and inept in what they're doing. The attack is so poorly planned and executed. It just falls completely apart. How are we supposed to have any good impressions of these people? They're the daughters of Oberyn Martell, yet they're not exactly carrying on his memory with any great, prestige.
I think the worst part of the episode is when Bronn says to, I think, Obara that she fights good for a girl, and then she lounges at him, and it just felt like I've seen that type of scene so many times on Glee or Ugly Betty, so much less comedy dramas. And this is supposed to be a high quality drama, high quality big budget drama type thing.
Her speech, "I am Obara's son, daughter of Oberyn Martell." Oh my god,
so
lame. We know.
Yeah, Arya is like, yeah, I know. We've met before.
For a while.
I'm Arya. We met at a party the other day. You don't have to keep giving me your resume.
Yeah, I do at least like how Jaime highlighted the fact he's an improviser and just has a terrible plan. So I can kind of forgive him and Bronn for just bubbling in. But
I can forgive Bronn anything. Bronn can do whatever he likes. Although one interesting development was maybe Bronn got a nasty cut, which might have been poisoned. So.
He's a goner, which is a shame.
I believe
Bronn's not long for the world, which is sad.
I don't know, maybe he's going to go down in a blaze of glory, liberating Jaime and Marcella somehow.
Well, we wouldn't do that, though. That's completely against Bronn's character.
I think it might be that little bit of redemption about how he does. I don't know. He realizes that he's screwed, and the Lannisters have been pretty good to him on aggregate.
Still, my favorite quote from KrakenCast is when Bronn's dying. He's like, "Tell lollies I love to castle."
Now, I'm wondering how they're going to characterize Doran, because in the books, like it's one of the like great big reveals that he seems calm and level-headed, but he's as vengeful and blood-crazed as the rest. He just wants to do it, cleverly and sort of pull it off with minimal losses to his side.
Well,
so he considers the children, but yeah, I'm wondering if they're going to go for that.
They keep it to the end.
Yeah,
They
well,
should.
it's kind of great. Like, I love the actors so far, but we've only seen him for about 2 minutes of screen time, and it's episode 6. Like, I thought this was the season of Dawn. We were going to get this really interesting, nuanced look at this kingdom and its politics and its rulers and its schemers. But so far, it's been fairly disappointing. I don't know. Well, some parts of it have been pretty good. Like, I like the episode 4, I think it was, the stuff in Dawn, apart from the Sand Snakes, obviously, the fight with Jaime and Brienne. I'm literally saying Jaime and Brienne still. Jaime and Bronn was exciting. That was cool introduction to the kingdom. But so far, I guess it's maybe backloaded. The cool stuff with Doran will be revealed towards the end. It's interesting though that Jaime and Bronn and the Sand Snakes are all imprisoned in the same place. Like, what are they going to talk about? Where is this storyline going? I have literally no idea.
That could be some good banter. It's just like Bronn shit-talking the Sand Snakes from behind his bars where they can't get to him. And then the reversal as he slowly starts dying.
Like, okay, where is Jaime going next? Either he's getting Myrcella and taking her home and then kicking off a war with Dorne, or he's being sent home empty-handed, which kind of seems like a pointless storyline, or he's staying in Dorne indefinitely and helping Doran do something.
Yeah, I was pondering this, and I'm thinking maybe him and Myrcella get away through some contrived, poorly written reason, and then that's the impetus to send Trystane overseas and take sort of a Quentin role in trying to marry Daenerys, because that seems like the only real way we'll get the vengeance, justice, fire, and blood line, because that's quite linked to the Targaryens. So yeah, maybe they're just smushing all the Doran's children into a single character.
Yeah, maybe Doran convinces Jaime of the political... No, but Doran hates the Lannisters. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, yeah, Jaime and Myrcella, like, break out somehow through some really... Like, some Dornishman drops the ball and they get free, and that's when Doran enacts his sell my son to the dragon lady plan. Okay,
Jaime escapes with Myrcella, and maybe Bronn has to sacrifice himself so they can do that. Anyway. Any thoughts on Tristan and Myrcella?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Guys, it's like Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, but I can't believe they sacrificed Arya for this scene. I mean, my goodness.
For this.
It's like, watching some teenage show, and it's, oh my god, Tristan, I really don't like him. He looks so smarmy, and he's, oh god.
I kind of liked, he's like just like suave. It felt a bit Oberyn to me. Like, he's obviously a crappy fighter, but he's still just got this. Yeah, I'm a ladies' man. I can get anyone I want. It's like, oh, Tristan, you card.
And 5 minutes later, smack.
And Bronn's like, yeah, you're on the ground, buddy. It's not the most offensive thing. It just feels a bit shallow. Like, these characters are just nothing really. We're not learning anything about them. They're just furthering the ultimate plot of Dawn. Myrcella is really clever and discerning in the books. Here she's a bit feels a bit flighty and dim and love-struck, but I guess it's not that big a deal. But I will say it looks nice. Dawn is very colourful compared to the rest of the show. There's definitely a happy feeling you get when you go there. It hasn't been ravished by war like all of the other places in Westeros. There's a sense of innocence, which kind of makes the fighting seem all the more childish, I guess. It's like, what are you fighting for? Look what you've got around you. Have you seen what the rest of the Seven Kingdoms look like? Get over it.
On aggregate, you're winning. Be happy.
You are way up.
But no, I liked how in the previously on role at the start, I think they had Bronn's line, oh, the Dornish are crazy, which kind of contextualizes everything, that everyone in that storyline just doesn't know what's going on and are just being weird and irrational. It's sort of maybe a subtle head nod as to them acknowledging just how absurd everything is.
Yeah, just Doran massaging his temples like, these bloody Dornish, they just do crazy stuff and I have to sort it out. Always cleaning up after them. It's like the books, unfortunately. Dorne always seems way cooler from afar. It seems so cool from the words of Oberyn, but once you actually get there, it's nowhere near as interesting. It feels much campier and sillier, and there's a fun element to parts of it, but within the context of this season, it just feels jarring.
I would disagree that it's like that in the books. In the books, I found it sort of going into Dawn to be like one of the highlights of the series for me, but I'm also one of the weird people that considers Feast his favorite book, so I may not have the best judgment.
Well, I think the best part of Dawn is Ariane, and they kicked her
definitely.
out. Like, it's her... it's her transformation. It's her growing up. Stop. It feels like the Sand Snakes are the childish way out, and the Doran is the adult's way out, and she has to set aside the Sand Snake's instinct to just do the immediate short-term response to thing and go with Doran and play the Game of Thrones and be his protege. And that's the through line to Dawn that's compelling. I think it's people like Darkstar and the Sand Snakes that feel a bit. They're not bad necessarily. They just feel a bit out of sorts with the novels themselves.
I'm sure if you were reading the book series as a particularly weird, like 9 or 10-year-old, you'd think the Sand Snakes and Darkstar are amazing. Yeah, from a more mature perspective, yeah, they're definitely sort of, the silliness of them sticks out as it might not to a young, impressionable person.
Well, I think they're definitely cooler in the books, for sure. I don't think they're much better in the books than in the show, I think, the way they're being depicted.
Definitely.
But I don't know. I think it's possible they can come back from this. We've seen some good stuff in Dawn. I like Doran. They might etch something interesting out of this, but it all depends on what they've got planned. If they've got nothing planned, then it's just going to fall into a heap. So we'll see, I guess. But anyway, shall we move on to King's Landing?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Littlefinger returns to the capital and meets with Queen Cersei. He reveals to her the location of Sansa Stark. Outraged, Cersei intends to ruin House Bolton, but Littlefinger tells her to wait for Stannis and Roose to bloody each other before allowing the Knights of the Vale to retake the north. Later, Olenna Tyrell arrives to help free her grandnephew Loras from the Faith militants' incarceration. During the inquest, Loras and Margaery deny the charges, but after Olivar's damning testimony, they are both arrested for lying. Olenna glares disapprovingly at Cersei. So I definitely internally cheered when Olenna hit the scene again and poked her head out the window and says, "You can smell the shit from 5 miles away." And I'm like, yeah, Queen of Thorns, get into it, tear it up. But she ended up not being that effective. Cersei got the better of her.
Yeah.
For now.
That's a bit weird for now, yeah.
For now, definitely, yeah. Cersei is thinking short term. She's choosing the childish way out. She's choosing petty grievances with Margaery over the long term sustainability of House Lannister and the royal family and all that.
It's very much I liked the scene between Cersei and Olenna because, yeah, how it sort of showed that, at least in that small interaction, Cersei thinks she's sort of hot shit and in control, and then Olenna just immediately calls her a tart and just throws her off balance. Sort of Cersei's just in the wrong league at the moment.
Yep, that's a good, throwing off balance, speaking truth to power, and Cersei's like, well, she's so used to playing the game of words and lies, and then Olenna starts hitting her with truth bombs. Like, what, do you just not want the wheat and the soldiers and the protection and the money that Highgarden is providing you? Do you not want that anymore? Why are you moving against us? And that there's no, rationale behind it beyond Cersei's desperate attempt to cling to power. And I guess it goes back to the first scene of the season, the fear about losing Tommen and all that, losing her children. It's the best thing in the world to her. It's her most precious thing. But, she's losing everything else because of that paranoia. And there was definitely a sense that Cersei was sort of losing control. Like when Littlefinger says the Boltons have turned against you, there's just immediate panic on her face. She's outraged. I will flay them alive. Jaime isn't here. My father isn't here. He would know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm not up to this, and everything's sort of unraveling. I'm reading into it. Like, we don't actually get any of that, but that's kind of what I sense.
Yeah, and probably also Littlefinger. I was surprised in his face when Lancel came up to him. So, Littlefinger's brother is one of the establishments got destroyed by the Faith, right? So he didn't get any news on that. So he seems like a bit surprised. And yeah, I believe he probably has, some crappy informants or something, because apparently, I think Brian Cockman mentioned this, that he also doesn't know about Ramsay. So maybe it's not only Cersei who's starting to lose the game, but also Littlefinger.
You got a pretty sick burn-in on Lancel. He says, we both peddle fantasies, mine are just more interesting. But I'm still not clear why Cersei had to coax him back to King's Landing, because what was their conversation about again? It was, I can't remember
just
even.
touching base, seeing how the Vale's going.
Yeah.
I can't remember it either.
But it seemed
only like a minute and a half of dialogue.
It seemed like they had a minute meeting, and then she's like, "There's nothing else," and it's like, "What? You just trashed his brothel to get him here, and that's all you have to say?" And it's not until it's it has to be Littlefinger to bring up all the goings on in the north.
Maybe it was just Cersei making a power play, just reminding Baelish that he's at her beck and call.
Yeah, I click, you come. So that's a good point, yeah. That would definitely be Cersei move.
That would be more of a threat if Littlefinger didn't have a TARDIS to get around so quickly. Clearly, travelling huge distances is not a big problem for him.
True. And what is Littlefinger's plan? It doesn't seem to make any sense. He thinks he's gonna... I'm assuming it's a lie, that he's playing both sides of the fence and he sees who's going to come out on top. But if Stannis captures Winterfell, is it now on him to take it back, leading the Knights of the Vale? As Cersei said, he's not a military man. He's never led an army in his life. What does he expect to do if Stannis triumphs?
Well, yeah, definitely... Littlefinger's plan is essentially break shit and pick up the pieces in a way that's useful to him. But yeah, he definitely doesn't make much logical sense on a surface level. We can only assume there's something clever going on in his head.
Yeah, well, I guess it goes back to season 3. He's just creating chaos, and then, as you say, piecing things back together in his interest to his advantage. But this seems, even by Littlefinger's standards, way too bold, because it can so easily turn against him. So I don't know. I'm not really sure what's going on. It's not clear. I don't even know if the showrunners have a plan.
Probably he's going to need Sansa, legitimacy to become the Warden of the North. So he's probably hoping that he can defeat the Boltons and throw them out of Winterfell and then claim Sansa as his bride. Maybe.
Oh, I see. Oh,
that's a good point.
That's possible. Because now he's implicated the Boltons in a betrayal against the Lannisters by marrying them to Sansa. And he's told Cersei, and she's against them now. She's given her blessing to destroy the Boltons, and once the Boltons are destroyed and he has the legitimacy of Warden, he could marry Sansa. Whoa, that is... Yeah, I reckon that might be right, Silvana.
Yeah, he's playing both the people in Winterfell and the people in King's Landing and kind of hedging his bets that sort of communication between those two centres is really, really bad. Like how he didn't know about Ramsay and about he didn't know about his... he didn't know about Ramsay when he was down south, and he didn't know about the Faith when he was in Winterfell, and how Cersei doesn't know about all the Bolton shenanigans. And yeah, I think the only side he can't work with is probably Stannis, because Stannis isn't the type to put up with Littlefinger's bullshit.
Definitely,
Stannis would probably deal with Littlefinger very quickly, as I think he said in the past.
There's nothing... there's nothing men like Littlefinger fear more than a truly just man. Stannis doesn't play the Game of Thrones. He's that's why we all love him.
So if he comes back and finds the Boltons in a position of strength, he throws his lot in behind them. If he finds either them or if he finds Stannis, he's probably going to have to fight Stannis regardless. If he finds the Boltons weak, he'll just go them and sort of try to stay in graces of the crown. But yeah, I think you're right in saying that he wants to get legitimized as Warden of the North and marry Sansa. That's his primary plan, but I think he's being very flexible about it.
Yeah, I think in the short term, he's definitely reaffirming his loyalty to the crown. Cersei, okay, she trusts him again. She's drawing up plans to give him more power. He's creating ambivalence between the Boltons and the Lannisters. But yeah, the idea of all of his plans orbiting around first Catelyn and now Sansa, that does make sense. Despite all of the chaos he seems to summon up, that does make sense as a through point, like a method to his madness. I guess Stannis is the one rub. If Stannis triumphs, I don't see how the Knights of the Vale could... if Stannis triumphs, he's going to be able to summon the loyalty of the Northmen. I don't think even all the Knights of the Vale are going to have much chance against the North. against Stannis, one of the main military commanders of Westeros. So it's definitely in his interest that the Boltons triumph. So he might work behind the scenes to ensure that.
You
Does
can make the
anyone
argument that
knows what type of size of army Stannis does have at the moment in the context of the show? I know that in the books, the Knights of the Vale, it's like 4,000 men, but I'm not sure what it would be in the show context, what type of armies they have.
Well, we see Stannis has a pretty sizable cavalry. I assume a lot of those are sellswords, though.
Yeah, it's probably men-at-arms style, like not full-on knights, but mounted soldiers with swords, with armor, that are fairly well trained.
He seems fairly confident. There's sort of two variables, though. It's how many men are going to die on the march to Winterfell now that winter's arrived, but also how many men are they going to gain from the Northmen. Like, I hope we do see that. We haven't seen enough of the kind of the fierce loyalty of the Northmen. Apart, we got a little nod with Lyanna Mormont. Bear Island knows no king but the King of the North. But it would be nice for him to win over the Northmen with that Stark loyalty on his march there.
I don't think Stannis could count much on the manpower of the North. The North seems a spent force, or at least it is in the books. Like, I think the only real manpower left in the North is the Bolton's troops that they haven't thrown. I forget her name, but the one lady that really doesn't like Ned, she has some forces left, and the Mountain Tribes
Dustin.
who we haven't. Yeah, Dustin. Yeah, she has some soldiers. The Boltons have some soldiers, and the Mountain Tribes, who we haven't heard of in the show. And for all we know, they may not exist in the show universe.
Yeah, it's mostly just the mountain clans.
But yeah, like the loyalty from the North, I don't see what it would mean for Stannis in terms of practical benefits.
Well, if they had Lord Manderley on the show, then he would possibly have a navy and a retinue of soldiers. But no, they cut him out.
Well, we have his son at the Red Wedding, just a rather plump fellow with a mermaid brooch, so they've kind of set it up a little.
I guess, yeah. I'd love for him to be in it, but it seems too late now.
I still think they should cast Martin himself as Wyman Manderley. He can do that menacing, plotting voice. Like, if you've ever heard him, I assume all of you have heard him do his readings. He can speak very well, and we can totally have him just delivering like menacing exposition and dancing around a pie.
Any thoughts on the pre-trial or what do they call it? The inquest into?
Oh, I love this scene. It reminded me so much of the Tudors as well, the whole setup of it, and I think the next few episodes will feel like that as well. The episodes where Anne Boleyn's trial and Catherine Howard's trial from the Tudors.
Yeah.
And I think also they did have a very similar scene in season 4 of the Tudors when Catherine Howard had a sentence. And so Alan Leach of Downton Abbey was a guest star in that episode. And he was sort of like Oliver in this episode, that he confessed to what he knew about Catherine Howard, and then much like in this show, I feel like that will come back to haunt him, that even though Oliver has confessed and maybe saved himself for a few days or a few weeks, that he'll still receive torture as a result.
Yeah, I was surprised that he hadn't been beaten up a bit when he arrived at the stand. I don't know, I've kind of liked Oliver. I thought he would have been slightly loyal to Loras, but obviously that's, he's just he knows nothing to Loras. He just used him as a prostitute, so I don't know. I guess he's just sort of saving his own skin, but I can't imagine the Faith being very merciful to Oliver. They're pretty fanatical.
You do make a good point, Duncan, that he hasn't been beat up already, and that would maybe coax him more into confessing at the trial.
Yeah, like he's either
that surprised me as well.
Made like a plea bargain sort of thing with the Faith, how he'll testify if he's immune from any backlash. But I kind of think Oliver's working for Littlefinger, that Littlefinger's affording him some protection and telling him to just go stir the pot in King's Landing and just kind of ruin all the remaining Southern lords while Littlefinger's off doing his stuff up north.
That's true. It would have been nice to see that scene, though. But I guess we can read into that, yeah, definitely.
Well, they might make a nod to it in the future. Just sort of, I'd prefer them to do that. How they just sort of have things make sense in hindsight, rather than have like how Littlefinger explained to Sansa how she was gonna like stay there until Stannis took over and then be leveraged against Stannis. Like that. Yeah, I'd rather not just have like 5 minutes every episode for Littlefinger telling his most recent scheme to someone.
True. Yeah, like he could, tell Loras, like, I'm sorry, I can't go against Littlefinger or something like that. There's definitely a sort of sad sense of betrayal when he reveals he has a Dornish birthmark on his thigh. It's like, it's sort of this intimate moment in the first episode, like this sense of, self-acceptance, like I'm sick of hiding, I don't care about it anymore, nobody cares. And then just to have such a reversal about, people are talking about him, and so he's an abomination rather than a person. So I felt for Loras.
Yeah, it's the first time I actually liked the show version of Loras. I think the show had never made him a particularly likable character. He's either a buffoon or a slut. But I think the scene, I really like him in this scene. And he might actually survive in the TV show.
He's definitely working that beard.
Yeah.
I think I like what Greg said on the forums. He's like, it's not a sad beard, it's as soon as I get out of here, I'm going to destroy every one of you, beard.
Yeah, they definitely seem to have let slip the fact that he's a total badass. So, yeah, fingers crossed with like a trial by combat would be nice, and get to see him just absolutely wreck some fool from the faith. This would be a nice little bit of vengeance for him after what he's been put through.
Like a fight between Loras and Lancel.
Good luck.
Yeah, that would be pleasantly one-sided.
I always get confused between those two. They look very similar. But Lancel now has a convenient shape carved into his head.
I've heard it speculated in the books that it'll be Lancel versus Ungregor, and that'll be Cersei's trial by combat, and that would be even more comically one-sided than the Tyrell versus him.
Yeah, he's like, the 7 gods will protect me, and then it just cleaves him in half.
Yeah, because Ungregor's a terrifying force. Like, he was scary when he was the Mountain, but now that he's a crazed zombie with, like, no capacity for pain or tiredness, and wearing armor that's said to be so big no man could wear it.
Yeah. I am sort of sad that we're not really getting much of Cersei's point of view. Like, she's there, she's a character, but we're not getting really in her headspace that much. It seems like Marjorie and Loras are more sort of the sympathetic characters, or the sort of point of view characters in the King's Landing storyline.
But at least we will get the walk of shame scene.
Yeah. Do you think we'll get that this season?
No, I think
yes.
I think it will be this season. I think I've heard somewhere or read somewhere it's episode 8 that happens.
Oh, that's close.
Yeah, it won't be next, like... There's no hint of it or anything in the next episode's like preview, and you'd think even if they weren't going to hint at it, it would be too quick for her to just be immediately arrested and then walk. Like, you think they might want to split that up for some tension, but yeah, so episode after next would be my guess.
Yeah, and it seems like that glare that Olenna gives Cersei, that she'll be the one that puts that into motion. She'll somehow implicate Cersei in a crime. Or it could be the Faith. It could be the Faith biding their time, sapping as much power and legitimacy as they can from Cersei before turning against her and revealing, her children are the product of incest, she's a fornicator, blah, blah, blah. Because, they have Lancel to give that testimony. So they might just be biding their time on that. Okay, any more to say on King's Landing?
Oh, well, I do have one more thing to say. In the UK, they have this show after Game of Thrones. It's called KrakenCast. And it's just like this presenter, Sue Perkins, and she invites some cast from the show, or they have celebrities come on and they talk about the show. And I couldn't believe there was some guy on there that talked about Tommen not being the youngest son, and that there's still a younger brother compared to Tommen, and that he could possibly be the king after Tommen is gone, for example. And I was thinking, what the hell is he talking about? And then it made me think back to season 1 that they used really young actors for Tommen.
Oh.
Like they had the 5-year-old child. And
Yeah.
I was thinking, do people really think that? Do people think that
Yeah, they might, yeah.
maybe if they're not as clued up with the show, or if they're not following along as well, that there's younger children out there, Lannister-type children?
Yeah, because you see that famous scene in the end of the Blackwater episode where little Tommen's perched on Cersei's knee, and then 2 seasons later you get this teenage son, and it's like, are they the same character?
If you're not a book reader or not the type to just like every couple months rewatch the entire series in a binge, It's been a long time since they saw that, so if you're just the type of person that catches it on a Sunday night because you've got nothing better to do, you may get confused over time.
Yeah, I could see that if you just watch it casually and there's just so many characters, you could be confused. Like, wasn't there a younger brother? I guess he's like in his nursery playing or something, so yeah. Okay, shall we move on to Winterfell?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. We've put it off for too long. We should just give our thoughts. So, while washing Sansa before her wedding, Miranda warns her of Ramsay's perverse temper. But Sansa replies that this is her home and she cannot be frightened. When she is ready, Theon escorts Sansa to the ceremony, where she is wed to Ramsay beneath the weirwood tree. Afterwards, Ramsay takes her to his bedchamber for the bedding. As Theon opens the door to leave, Ramsay orders him to stay and watch. He then rips Sansa's dress open and forces himself on her, while Theon watches in silent horror. So, yeah, this was pretty horrific. I felt like just nauseous as the credits rolled. I don't know, like, this is definitely a brutal world and a brutal show, and we're often sort of complicit in enjoying that brutality. You know, there's scenes of extreme violence, and sometimes we sort of revel in that if it's directed at people, characters we hate or whatever, and you know, we obsess over the Red Wedding and watching, you know, we're broadcasting our show Watch It Friends reaction to all that, but this definitely cut underneath that, and it just became this very miserable scene that I dislike. Yeah, a lot of people dislike it on a number of levels. They dislike it because they've completely changed the storyline and they've invented this new storyline, and it just seems to be in service to this horrible act. And I don't know, what are you guys' thoughts? Do we want to just sort of go around and just gauge people's reaction? You know, did you feel like rage quitting the show, or what were your responses? Silvana, do you want to go first?
The showrunners, I think, gave in the script mentioned that this is the romance dies scene, and I think for Sansa, romance has died ever since she watches her dad, you know, being beheaded by Ellen Payne. There are a lot of thoughts. I mean, like, I wish that they handle the Sansa story better. Why not have her charm Ramsay, you know, soften him a bit, or maybe try to get Roose to act like Tywin towards Joffrey. Joffrey cannot do anything to Sansa whenever there's Tywin, right? So she's still important for the Bolton's claim to the north. And unlike fake Arya or Jane Poole, she is not fake, obviously, and there can be no doubt that all the northern bannermen will rally to her. And the second thought is it a calculated risk? I mean, she surely knows about Ramsay. She saw, you know, she was in the dinner, and Miranda deliberately or not deliberately warned her about Ramsay. So, well, you know, she kind of, you know, okay, I'm in this situation. So what does she expect? I wonder what's happening in her head, you know. What was she thinking when she said yes in front of the heart tree? Okay. I'll stop right there. I still have more things to say, but later.
I agree, definitely. Yeah, it seems like Sansa's arc has been about moving away from being a victim and a pawn in other people's games to having a sense of agency and a sense of determination over her own destiny. And that's the arc that we've been traveling on since book one, or since the first season. And that's definitely the direction we seem to be heading in as we move into the Winds of Winter. She's in a completely different place, a completely different storyline. And this seems to just cut that off at the knees. She's suddenly just a victim again. She's suddenly just the object of horror and humiliation, something that was threatened in the first couple of books at the hands of this sadist Joffrey. And now the showrunners have decided to regress to that point in her character development, in her journey. And it doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't seem to coalesce. You know, a lot of people have made the case that it's in the story. They've just merged her storyline with another storyline. And maybe that works in terms of plot, but it doesn't work at all in terms of what she's going through as a character. It seems completely disjointed with that. And at the same time, it's also so much more horrible because she's a character that, unlike who she's replacing, Jane Poole, she's a character that we've grown up with, that we've watched grow up, that she's gone through things. We have an emotional connection to her. So this act is 1,000 times more horrible than the character that they're replacing her with. This is the deliberate decision on the showrunner's part. And I don't get the argument that people are just like, she's just filling in for another character. Just get over it. Like, obviously, it's so much more horrific than that. Like, a lot of people just don't seem to get that. Anyway, I'm sort of talking too long. Joseph, what was your sort of gut reaction to the scene?
Yeah, it's sort of when I think about things, I tend to break them down into levels and split them apart. And my sort of first separating objective from subjective thought. On a subjective level, it was just visceral and disturbing and just like a continuous gut punch. Once I sort of put the sort of disgust that it generated in me to the side. Objectively, there's sort of the question, is it relevant and sort of was it a wise choice? And probably not. They probably should have done something else, but it's sort of presupposing that it's done and sort of analysing it. My judgment's really, I'm withholding it to see where the arc goes, because I definitely agree with you. Like, it's sort of, the scene makes sort of logical sense in that it's what you expect to happen in this sort of society when she's just like married off to someone for political reasons, but it just jars so much with where her arc's going, sort of as she gradually finds strength and becomes a player rather than a pawn. And it seems sort of very much regressing sharply for no real decent reason. But I think that the writer has said that it's sort of a calculated sort of thing on her part, and she's doing it sort of in order to sort of keep going and sort of stay there and become relevant to the situation. But yeah, I don't think there's any real way to judge it until we see the next 2 or 3 episodes and see how it ends up, because I'm not really optimistic.
Yeah, it's like you have to sort of ask the question, what is the purpose of this decision? Is the purpose to show that Ramsay is a horrific sociopath, that we want to die? Like, we already knew that. We already felt that. Was the point to show the plight of women being married into these situations and having to, not their consent not being relevant? Like, that's something that's been beaten into us about this world since episode 1 with Dany. That information has already been conveyed to us. So in terms of world building, I think it's superfluous. I think it's gratuitous in that sort of narrative sense. It again fulfills that threat that's been dangling over her head since the early books for no apparent reason. It's something she's constantly been able to escape, and now suddenly they just throw it on her. They just pour all the water out of the bucket. And I guess the thing that would probably make it not good for me, the thing that would probably make me hate the show, is if the purpose of it is to give motivation to Theon's character, for him to sort of break out of his trance, and that's his motivation to save Sansa, or it's for us to root against Ramsay, or it's for us to root for Brienne to save her, or for Stannis to save her, because again, it just returns Sansa to the status of a prop, a narrative device, a fulcrum in other people's storylines, which is so offensive because Sansa, more than any other character in the North, apart from Jon, is a protagonist of this story, and they're completely stripping her of agency. But I guess that's only if it carries out in that fashion. There are other avenues, I guess, that could make it not as horrific or offensive as that, but I still totally understand why people would rage quit that, because for all of the brutality that they create with this world and this story, somehow you never thought they'd go that far, I guess, because... anyway, I'm still talking. I have a bit more to say, but I'll let someone else... Glenn, did you have any... What were your sort of gut reactions to the scene?
Well, I can agree it was disturbing, but I think maybe that's just because we've grown up with Sansa, that we've seen her from a very young age, and now she's 16 or 17 now, but we started the show when she was 13, and I think that, with the scene I was expecting it to happen because it was coming towards the end of the episode, and I know that, of course, you can expect shock endings to end the episode on a cliffhanger, but I was just expecting much worse. So when Ramsay put his hand over her cheek, I was just expecting for him to attack her and maybe use a bit more physical violence on Sansa, or the purpose of having Theon there, it could have been much worse. So Ramsay knows how much Sansa hates Theon, that maybe he could have had Sansa interact with Theon, and if she didn't, then it would be much worse for her. So maybe there was some... so some of the foreplay could be between Sansa and Theon, for example, to warm her up, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess I don't really take too much comfort in the fact that it could have been worse, because it definitely is worse in the books. Like, the character that she's substituting in, goes through I mean, we shouldn't really judge trauma on a spectrum, I guess, but to me, it still felt way worse than, say when she gets married to Tyrion. She sort of, again, it brings it back to the idea that women are mistreated and abused in this world, and she starts undressing in her room with Tyrion, and she starts drinking wine. She's expecting this to have to engage in non-consensual sex with Tyrion. He spares her that torment, but this is so much worse. I guess it just seems like they're ratcheting up to 11. Like Sansa has always been the victim of this threat, and now they've just gone all the way. It's just rubbing our faces in it. It's like this is the worst horror show you could imagine. It's not just she's being raped on her wedding night. She's being bent over and having her dress ripped off, and it's Theon's watching in the corner like this abuse victim, and it's the absolute worst thing you could possibly imagine to this character who is so closely entwined with this idea of a person, unlike many of the characters, who is maintaining a sense of innocence and a sense of compassion in the face of abject cruelty. Like, that's her triumph in places like King's Landing. The fact that she survives not only physically, but like emotionally and spiritually. She's still, I don't know, like to me, I think I compare this to, I guess it's more the book scene, but it also occurred in the show, the scene with the Hound at the end of book 2, where the power of that scene comes, what am I trying to say? The threat's there, like the threat of rape is there, and Sandor represents like the violent savagery, and he wants to rape her and destroy her, and he's all full of battle fury and all that. But somehow she is able to acknowledge his humanity or something, and it forces him to acknowledge hers. And to have that scene play out where the threat of rape is like neutralized, and it was a powerful moment in book 2 that is just kind of ruined by this scene. It feels gratuitous. Again, it all sort of depends on the context of the scene in terms of how Sansa responds to it in later episodes. But I guess for a lot of people, the way sexual assault has been handled in previous seasons, like Craster's Keep and Jaime and Brienne, there's not a lot of confidence in the way that they're going to be able to handle this with nuance and with sort of empathy towards what Sansa is going through, as opposed to the rape simply being used as a motivator to get revenge on the Boltons, or for her to, do whatever, or for other characters to save her or whatever. So, I don't know.
Yeah, we're talking about, people stop watching this show, but I've read some in the forums, well, not the podcast of Ice and Fire forums, but readers forums. Some people are actually considering or already deciding to stop reading the series, the book series, because of this scene.
Yeah.
So it's because they're basically blaming George. They thought that George actually have share some of the responsibility over the changes they made in the show. And yeah, it just, I'm really concerned about that, because we're losing readers. And even George has already posted in his blog that the show is a show, the book is the book. He even had to make that kind of, clarification, that statement, to quell all this, anger that, people throwing at him.
Well, yeah, it's a good point. A lot of, we try to, more and more as the seasons have progressed, we've tried to separate the books from the show. These are two different things. But it's difficult to disentangle that scene from book Sansa. Obviously she's in a very different place physically and emotionally in the books, but I don't know. Yeah, you can't unwatch the scene, I guess. But I don't know what the future holds for Sansa's character in the books. I don't think it's this. I don't think it's anywhere near this. I think the arc that she's cresting towards is about having more agency, about being able to be a player, to get people on her side, being able to manipulate even people she doesn't like. And that was a good point you made about, there's no sense that she's able to manipulate and get out of the situation she's in. That's the implication that Littlefinger makes, like, you will make him yours. But once he's gone, we don't really see any of that. It sort of returns to the Sansa that we knew in season 2. It's like, that awkward dinner sequence feels very reminiscent of the dinner sequence we see in season 2, where she's just at the mercy, at the cat's paw of these abusive sadists again. and we don't see her making active decisions to escape that. I definitely think there's much more steel in her, much more strength in her. She talks to Miranda when she's taunting her about Ramsay. It's like, you can't scare me. I'm Sansa Stark of Winterfell. I'm not frightened. But I think, as you say, the agency has been stripped away from her in that scene. It just becomes this violating act when they could have gone any other number of ways. She could have somehow, I guess, it still would have been bad, but it didn't have to be as bad as they chose to portray it. But yeah, again, yes.
Going back to what Sylvana said, I sort of find that ridiculous that people would stop watching the show or stop reading the books. I mean, there's been much worse things that have happened, like Lawless being raped by 50 people, or a lot of that's the one that comes to mind. But that seems pretty tame in comparison.
Well, that's true, but I think Sansa is a protagonist. I don't think Martin has ever shown or depicted a protagonist being raped. We've seen them being murdered, but never raped. We get flashbacks of Cersei being abused by Robert and all that, but people like Brienne are always threatened with that, but it's never been shown. And of all the POV characters, Sansa is like the worst person for this to happen to. I mean, there's probably others, but it just seems like she's the most sort of innocent or human or fragile. It just seems like the ultimate sadistic decision on the part of the writers or the part of the showrunners. And yes, as you say, there's worse things. It's a brutal world. There's far worse things that happen to, characters that we don't see, side characters like Jane Poole, but that returns to the narrative of the story, the world building. That's where that kind of horror lies. But the other part of the story is the characters themselves and what they're going through. And in that sense, this act is far more traumatic, I think, for the average reader or watcher.
But then it's showing some realism that how many escapes can someone have? Like, Sansa's been very lucky up until this point. There's always someone there to help her or help her escape. That it was inevitable that something would be a bit more realistic like this happening, that on her wedding night that she would consummate the marriage.
That's true.
And have to do her duty, so to speak.
As though it plays into the fairy tale that someone will always be there to rescue you. I guess I think of Brienne being rescued by Jaime, but yeah, I guess that's a point, but it just feels like that's a regression. So I guess that's why people are sort of don't accept that argument. But I mean, there's a lot of arguments being put forth. So, there's a lot of debate. I'm not, obviously our thoughts aren't the be all and end all or whatever, but we're just giving our personal opinions. I guess did we want to say anything about the scenes in Winterfell prior to this scene, just like the Miranda washing Sansa's hair and all that? And any thoughts on the acting? Or I don't know, I just thought the way the scenes were shot was beautiful. Just the way Sansa was framed, as you sort of zoomed in on the window, it just looks like she was behind bars. And as I said, like Arya, her scenes are sort of bathed in darkness and lit by sort of candle flames. It's a very haunting sort of beauty to the scenes.
I did think that Sansa was pretty fierce in that scene, just confronting Miranda and just saying that I know what you're talking about, and I'm not a scared little girl anymore. I like that scene.
The wedding is beautiful.
It was, yeah. I liked her dress.
I kept, trying to look for other, or the other bannermen during the wedding, because we have those in the books, but couldn't find any.
It was a pretty small ceremony. I don't think there's much love for the Boltons.
Private ceremony.
Yeah.
What was missing was the fact that in this scene that everyone knows that it is Sansa Stark, whereas in the books it's Jane Poole pretending to be Arya. And I sort of missed the part about when they're having the wedding scene that Theon is thinking that he can just say it's not Arya and that'll end the marriage right there. So I was sort of missing that element of it.
Yeah, and I definitely felt for Theon as well. Yeah, the performances by Alfie Allen and Sophie Turner were just phenomenal. And you can see, just the guilt and the heartache on Theon's face as he's forced to do this, as he's forced to continue his betrayal of the Starks, unwillingly, but all the same. So I'm wondering what'll happen, whether... I'm sort of hoping that... Because there's a kinship in the sense that they're both like victims of Ramsay. So I'm wondering if it might actually be Sansa who rescues Theon rather than Theon who rescues. Like she'll get in touch with Brienne. She'll realize that things are too bad for her to control in Winterfell. She'll get in touch with Brienne and then decide to save Theon along the way. That could be an interesting change.
I think it'll evolve into. I think that's sort of one of the better possible trajectories for this to end up going is sort of Theon and Sansa sort of building up a rapport between each other because they both realize that they're under the thumb of just this terrible person, and sort of them working together, and this will like make Sansa less coldly disposed to Theon, and this will spark a bit of Theon and like the old Theon within Reek, and sort of they'll both end up growing from this and both work together to gain agency, whereas if they were sort of individually suffering, they wouldn't sort of find a strength between their mutual suffering, from their mutual suffering, I should say.
Yeah, definitely. And it's sort of thrown water on it, but the Theon redemption storyline is something I'm very much looking forward to.
Yeah, because you see it, like there's, at least it seemed to me, there was like a flash of anger in Reek's eyes, sort of like he wasn't, like this, that goes back to what you said, like it would just be terrible if this just turned out to be sort of a one-sided fulcrum to like smack Theon out of his trance, but I think it could work out quite well with the two playing off each other, and it seems like this is one step too far for Ramsay. Like he's been able to abuse Theon as much as he can, but sort of in going after Sansa, sort of driving home the implication for Theon's actions beyond just Theon, and how sort of all his suffering has been directed at him, but now he's realized that his actions and him taking Winterfell and him like opening the door for the Boltons has let other people he cares about or has previously cared about to suffer as well.
Yeah, and a big part of Theon's torture in previous seasons was the idea that he somehow deserved it, that the guilt he felt over what he did to the Starks was internalized and turned against his body and his mind, that sort of self-hatred and that self-loathing. But the fact that it's now being inflicted upon Sansa is, as you say, like a step too far. It's being enacted upon an innocent, and the guilt is almost overwhelming for Theon, so much so that it turns into anger, the first anger we've probably seen in him since season 2.
I did like the reference to the books when Miranda tells Sansa about a girl called Kira that Ramsay grew tired of.
Yeah.
It's Brian Cogman sprinkling in little show references, even in the most bleak and depressing parts.
He's always there.
Oh, I was going to ask, I'm not sure because I haven't looked it up at all, but is George writing, or has he written an episode from this season?
Not this season, no. He said he was going to take a break from writing to focus on Winds of Winter.
He's got other things to worry about.
I thought that was season 6 that he was going to not write an episode, because I remember reading an article about that he wouldn't write an episode for season 6, but maybe it was season 5.
Well, it could be both. Like he may have just dropped his writing commitments for the show. A, because he's got stuff to do, but B, also sort of for fear that any potential book spoilers that show up in a George written episode might be sort of legitimized over the others. Like the fact that at this point, the only person that knows how the books are going to end, like 100%, or as near enough as you can get, is George. Like having George writing an episode with potential book spoilers is like a complicated matter.
Whereas if because he's not involved with the show and writing episodes, I guess book readers have the faith that what we're seeing on the screen isn't going to actually happen in the books. I can see your point there.
Yeah, I just looked it up on Wikipedia, and they haven't announced the writers. Oh no, sorry, they haven't announced the producers. The director's words fail me. But no, Martin isn't writing one this season.
Okay.
We've got Benioff and Weiss are writing the next 2 episodes, and 9 and 10 haven't had their writers announced yet. That is accurate, I believe.
And we know the titles of the episodes up until 9, I think?
Yep. That's The Gift, Hard Home, The Dance of Dragons, and 10 is yet to be announced.
It'd be funny if that was the actual title of the episode.
No, TBA. But,
Dance of Dragons, that sounds like a cool episode. I imagine that's the fighting pits, Drogon absconding with the Queen.
Yeah, that actually brings a point. Are we going to see the Battle of Ice this season? Because it would seem odd to put the Battle of Ice in an episode called The Dance of Dragons. So, and it would seem, because it's like the big conflict, and it would be weird. Like they seem to like episode 9 as their big conflict episode and sort of the crescendo of the season. So, are we going to see that in episode 10? Maybe.
And they've got Hardhome, which I imagine is going to be a big battle sequence, and then Dance of the Dragons and Cersei's trial somewhere in there, possibly. So where does Stannis get left? You know, I mean, the ultimate subversion would be he marches his army there and there isn't a battle because something happens to Stannis or something happens to Bolton or...
Whilst I'm actually on the Wikipedia page, I just scrolled down a little and saw critical reception for season 5, and it's 1, 3, 4, and 5 have been at 100%. Episode 2 was about 98, and episode 6 is in the low 60s. It's just a notable drop in critical reception, which is understandable.
There you go. Okay, any more to say on the episode, guys?
Nope.
No? Okay. No. Well, that was a good episode, guys. Thanks for. I think we worked through the episode in like a therapeutic fashion. I think.
Yeah, and I'm actually thinking retroactively, after having discussed it, 2.5 might have been a little generous. I forgot completely about how bad the Dornish storyline was. Yeah. It was stuff that overshadowed it.
True. Yeah.
The worst part of the episode.
Yeah. But I'm still, I'm going to watch the rest of the season, definitely. Definitely till the end of the season. So, yeah, hopefully we can do a couple more reviews. Well, that concludes KrakenCast for this week. Typically, we record on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Although I say that now, but the last 3 times we recorded at 7:30, so check the forums. You can catch the American episode reviews on Thursdays with the DragonCast and the European episode reviews on the weekend with the Wolfcast. So thank you for joining me, Joseph.
Thank you. It's been a blast.
Silvana.
Thank you. See you next week.
And Glenn.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you later.